I'm living through the love winds. I'm living through the love winds. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to another episode of the Reconnect with Your Teenager podcast with yours truly, Emma G. If you are new to this platform, if you are new to this place, if you are new to me, let me introduce myself super quickly. My name is Emma G, and I am a youth empowerment through songwriting coach, helping young people to step into their power, find their voice, and recognize that the answers really do live within them as they work to overcome their struggles and stress and turn them into dope songs that will serve them long into the future. Now, I understand and recognize and celebrate the fact that that is one very let's just say different way of approaching the whole youth development sector. So I decided, why not talk to other unconventional therapists, coaches, mentors, and counselors from around the world? And today, I am joined by none other than the Dr. Brett, all the way from Florida at the moment. Dr. Brett is a renowned human of all kinds of things. He has experience as a sports coach. He works with teenagers. He does all kinds of psychology and life coaching and entrepreneurial work and executive work, and it's all about taking people's game to the next level. So that was not meant to be a pun, but here we are. How's it going, Dr. Brett? Happy Tuesday. What's going on?
Said. Taking their game to the next level. Well said.
I mean, listen, I'm full of dad jokes. One day I will be a great father.
That's funny. Unlikely.
A girl can dream. But no, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to speak with you. Your journey, your mission, your vision are, really exciting to me, given how, as you were saying before we went live, how aligned our missions are when it comes to our approach to youth work. So for those who are listening or watching the replay, please give them a sort of what's your 411? Tell us your elevator pitch about who Dr. Brett is.
Well, I have this character. I refer to myself playfully as this character called Dr. Brett. I have a doctorate in psychology, and I do a hybrid of life coaching, business coaching, psychology, and sports psychology. So I'm working mostly with adolescent athletes, 15 to 25-year-olds, and then a lot of entrepreneurs because I'm entrepreneurial in spirit and style. And then the executives that aren't too in the box. So some of these big executives, if they are too corporate, they're not going to be a fit. But if they're willing to sort of mix things up and do life a little bit differently, then who knows, maybe we are a fit. And some of them have been amazingly successful in this process of getting coached by me.
I love that. So let's break it down a little bit.
Yes,
you
please.
Do sports psychology, you do executive coaching, you do life coaching for people young and old. That is such a wide diaspora of specialties. So how did you get involved in this entire world in the first place?
Well, I went to Emory University in Atlanta, and I was a double major in economics and psychology. So
I love Atlanta.
I actually got hired as an underwriter coming out of school, and I spent a couple of years in business in New York City, and it felt too empty. I have a business side that I now utilize to either trade or coach people, or to build my own business. But I really just felt like, I'm wired on this planet to make a difference. And so I decided to get a doctorate in psychology in the 90s. And I went out to grad school in San Diego, and I spent 5 years in that beautiful paradise. And then I came back, and I had a traditional life going all through my 30s as a licensed psychologist in the burbs, Westport, Connecticut, Fairfield County, Connecticut, and a little bit beyond that. And then at 40, I did a spiritual journey that went a little bit haywire. I worked with the wrong spiritual master type, which didn't turn out to be very good because I wrecked my nervous system and lost my ability to sleep for nearly 3 months twice. And so the severe beating that I took on this planet is extreme. When you can't sleep for months, I went no more than 20 minutes to an hour a night for almost 100 days twice. And the first one I survived by meditating 6, 7, 8 hours a night. And the second one I barely survived. So I understand firsthand, some doctor types don't really understand severe depression or anxiety or a life that gets off base or whatever. And so I came back to Connecticut, where I'm a licensed psychologist, and I built the business back in a year. I was suicidally depressed at first, and it took me years to recover physically and emotionally, but I built the business back in a year by meeting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of strangers for a coffee, which is my metaphor for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and actual coffee. And then I playfully say that 1 out of 10 of those strangers became a client, friend, or lover. And so I was sort of off to the races in terms of building my life back. But the physical sort of devastation took longer. And then some of the emotional issues took a while to work through. But when I was coming through it, I decided I just didn't want to be full-time in Connecticut anymore because I had been traveling prior to that. Yeah, exactly. So I moved to Los Angeles for a while, and I was a writer as well.
Super similar place.
Well, LA is fascinating for a year or two, but then if you're not part of the industry, it's a little tricky.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was writing a giant story. It took me like almost 5 years to write this huge story that I didn't publish. But I wrote this little ebook in the process while my editor had the big story. Now you can use ChatGPT, and it's like you can edit your own writing. But back then, like this process took a while.
Yeah.
So then so I was bi-coastal for a long time, LA to Connecticut, and now I'm Florida to Connecticut. I keep coming back and forth, and I have a pretty big, broad client base of athletes and entrepreneurs. They're all around the country. Some of them are international, but some of the commonalities are just, people that are a fit. They like who I am and what I'm about, and they're ready to sort of elevate their game. And I just teach everybody how to train their minds, because if you don't train your mind, it doesn't matter, like I say all the time, how big your house is or how beautiful your girlfriend is, or your wife. It's not going to matter. You got to train your mind as well.
Yeah. I have so many questions. What a story. Oh my goodness. First of all, shout out to Connecticut. That was where I had my first ever contract in youth development in the States. I worked in Lakeside, Connecticut for 3 months in the woods. And, that was kind of the beginning of my journey in youth work in this country. But I'm fascinated. So one of the things for you that I think is not typical in the life coaching space, especially, but also in the psychology space, is you've somehow found a balance between the spiritual aspect of coaching, but also the more therapeutic or clinical, shall we say, aspect of coaching when it comes to empowerment, yes, but also psychology. That's an interesting line to kind of balance on how, in your journey through your own personal experience, but also through the work that you do with other people. How are you finding that balance to be in your career?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. I really love the question. How am I finding that balance between really the spiritual realm in my world is present moment time. So there's two aspects to spirituality from my worldview. There's the ability to be in the here and now and present. And then there's that sense of interconnectedness that somehow we're all in this thing together. And I've always sort of had that sense that that's possible. I've had many experiences knowing it, but I think there was a deeper sense there. And so if and when people are ready for my kind of guidance, I'm going to teach them to be a lot tougher, like have a lot more courage, be more adventurous, be more creative, mix things up, do things differently. But I'm also going to teach you how to come back into the here and now and how to train your mind. So I'm constantly interweaving the two. But then, if people are ready, we're going to work on their business skills and their communication skills for sure. My core philosophy is basically off the field for on the field and vice versa. So I was just working with a kid who's a major league prospect this morning. He threw a no-hitter, and we're getting close to where he needs to be in life. And a lot of the training we've done is all these things off the field in terms of his ability to stay present, his ability to communicate, his ability to stay clear of, stupid substances and stuff to slow him down and don't make him great.
What? Substances slowing people down? Never. So
There's this whole world of medicinal weed now, and the truth is, it slows you down.
I mean,
every day is not, you're gonna wake up a little bit, less talented
and less motivated. And okay, so
Totally. And less motivated. It's well said, Emma.
yeah, I mean, listen, I've been a musician for my entire life, and I have
Yeah.
lost count of how many, musicians and songwriters, especially, have always told me that, it makes me more creative. I've had, I've been in the weightlifting and Krav Maga world for a long time as well, and they've also argued that when you get the munchies as an after result of being intoxicated, inebriated, then it just makes empowers them and encourages them to eat better and get more gains. I'm like, the the logic is incredible. Okay, so nonetheless,
So we're doing that as well. We're looking at their diet, right? Things that aren't so traditional, right? As a life coach, we look at what they're eating, right? Not just their exercise, right? And their habits, but have food as a habit. So is organization, right? So we're
yeah,
always working on habits.
yeah. So one of the things that I have found has been like a really, I don't know, like a difference factor. You mentioned the term difference factor before. One of the things that I find a lot of the difference factor coaches and mentors and psychologists and therapists have is that key understanding of how our bodies functions feed into our mindset functions, and how our mindset feeds into our emotional balance and well-being, and that feeds into our social balance and well-being. Can you talk a little bit about how you have found that in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's another really good question there. The mindset, look, I mean, there's a lot made of the Kobe Bryants of the world or whatever that had this incredible mindset. But the truth is a little bit more complicated than that. There are lots of people with amazing mindsets that don't make it to the highest level. They're just not, they're not talented enough, but they've had amazing mindsets. I've coached a lot of minor league golfers that had what you would call nearly a perfect mindset and didn't make it. Right. So mindset is definitely a part of the piece, but so is talent as well. And you kind of need both. Can you develop some of that talent? Yes, you can develop some of it, but some of it is also God given, right? Especially at the very highest levels, right? It really depends on, who you are and what you're about and what you want to experience and how you want to, go about living, right? What kind of partnerships you want. I mean, part of success on this planet is just, the person you choose, your fiance, Mr. Krav Maga. I mean,
I choose well.
yeah, well, so do I, but you're like, I want to say you're 3 feet away, but you're 500, 800 miles away from I had probably 30 relationships prior to meeting my wife, right?
Of course.
It definitely took a long time to sort of, because I was watching the world in Westport, Connecticut, and it didn't seem like a happy world. All these people that were married, that put all this pressure on me to get married or to have 2 kids at the time and so on. And so it took longer to sort of figure this thing out. But when I was ready to choose my partner, I was pretty decisive, right? I had so much more awareness. So I try to, even the athletes, I try to slow everybody down. If they're male, females, it's harder with biological clocks, as you know. So maybe they need to arrive at that partnership a little sooner. But most kids in their 20s aren't going to choose a partner for a lifetime. And so that's going to be part of our process too, is slowing people down, teaching them to be more present, and then to communicate so straight up and so straightforward that you're weeding out faster. I got 3 new business calls today. One of them is going to be a client. The other 2 are not, because I'm so freaking straightforward that I'm not for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? I use that word, not the freaking word. Like,
my PG version of it is, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And that's everything in life, I love that. So you're okay. Again, I want to kind of take a step back a little bit, because as a sports psychology coach and life coach, you're, you're working with a lot of young people who, excel in a variety of different fields that you may or may not be professional at, for example. Similar to like when I'm working
Yeah,
with my
like
songwriting coach.
rowing or something. I really,
Right,
I
right.
rode once or twice, my back cramped up.
Okay, okay. And I have a lot of hip hop clients
Yeah,
who, and I'm
and
like,
that's
I don't rap at all. The G does not stand for gangster. I'm sorry.
right. Well, look, there's certain sports I'm not doing. I never grew up playing hockey. We grew up playing baseball. I say we, I'm an identical twin.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So I say we a lot, and that means just the way I was raised. But the
Sure.
mental game is similar in almost every sport, training the mind.
That
I'm
part.
teaching everybody meditation, mindfulness, visualization, breath work, positive self-talk, and then what I call relatively advanced communication skills. If they were taught in third grade, they wouldn't be that advanced. But most parents aren't great communicators because they don't work at it enough. And then most kids don't learn it in school. The teachers aren't necessarily equipped to teach them how to be great communicators either.
That
So
part.
when I get a hold of them, yeah, I know you know this. When I get a hold of them, I am freaking tenacious about
Yeah.
teaching these kids how to communicate better. And that's a big part of our coaching. Just, you're using music and I'm using like energy, I mean,
Mm.
and I'm giving people lots of homework, lots of different exercises to train their mind. But this is courage. When you have the power to bring something up with a parent, with a coach, with a sibling, or with a girlfriend or boyfriend, you're working on your courage. A lot of people hold shit in and then explode, as you know.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things that you kind of take it for granted to a point, right? But having grown up in New Zealand myself and now teaching, contract to contract in different schools here in the States, it's fascinating to me how, because you talk a little bit about like we don't teach our kids how to communicate, but the thing that
Well,
fascinates
I
me the
mean,
most.
well, for sure.
Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
But it's changed. Communication has changed. You talked about Chat GPT. That has changed the game when it
Yeah.
comes to how we communicate. When we talk about Snapchat, when we talk about TikTok being a totally new communication tool, how do you navigate that space when it
Well,
comes
that,
to sports
another good
coaching?
question. I mean, look, with all the kids I coach, some of them are younger than 14 or 15, but I
Okay,
just specialize more in like, later adolescence just because it's a little more fun, a little more stimulating for me.
sure.
But occasionally I get the 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, whatever. But, we're always working, especially in adolescence, around taking social media breaks and not, being too addicted to your phone, right? And that is a part of our conversation. It's like weed, porn, alcohol, chocolate. It's another addiction that's
Hey,
nasty.
there's no need to bring chocolate into this.
Really
Okay.
tough. People like the like less sugar chocolates or whatever.
The 80% cacao. Thank you. Thank you.
Exactly. Totally, the ones that provide the right chemical, like
Yeah.
mix up or whatever. But yeah, I'm getting at. So, like that's part of our conversation. That's part of habits, right? If you're, dicking around on your iPhone, like, I mean, all day long on Instagram and chat and whatever it is, and YouTube and Twitter and so on, and
Mm,
for it's TikTok, right? You're getting addicted to short-term stimulation and novel stimulation in a way that's messing with your neurochemistry.
mm,
Right. So
mm.
it's like it's reinforcing ADD as if there isn't enough of it in our culture, right?
Right.
And what
Right.
I'm doing is the opposite. I'm teaching people how to like slow down. I teach everybody to eat with their non-dominant hand, right?
Oh,
So yeah. So are you a righty, Emma? What are
I
you?
am. I'm
Yeah.
actually relatively ambidextrous.
Yeah.
I
There
eat
you
like
go.
a left-handed person.
Perfect.
All
So
of it.
yeah, exactly. So if you weren't ambidextrous, I'd be, teaching you to eat lefty, right?
Yeah,
Why would
I
you do
love
that?
that.
Because it slows you down, gets you more present, and teaches you
Mm,
poise. What's the basis of poise? Being more present, right? And being
yeah.
more patient, right? So, and then if you're a creative type, so you probably mix things up, but a lot of people are fucking boring, right? So they don't mix things up. So I'm always
Facts.
we're always getting people to like, look, I ran a full business 5 years ago from Beijing and Bangkok. Now, I don't recommend people running a business from Beijing. It was ridiculously difficult, right? But that's a lot of flexibility, right? So I'm
Yeah.
I'm not just teaching flexibility, I freaking live it, right? So
Mm.
And they know this from my energy field, right? You know what I mean? I'm teaching these kids to do things that their, school systems and environments aren't teaching them to do. We got to mix it up,
Absolutely.
do it differently. Go have dinner by yourself. Like, some of these kids have never traveled by themselves, right?
Mm.
Have kids come, and spend a couple days with us if the parents are cool with it. And we show them the whole experience of living that's way out of the box for what they're used to.
Yeah.
And it's just freaking cool. It's just the ocean, fishing, golf, right? I mean, just, a little deeper conversation maybe. Like,
Yeah. So I want to go back to the TikTok thing because
yeah.
I feel like we can totally. I'm totally picking up what you're putting down, but you mentioned something about like getting lost in the source when it comes to social media in particular, and I know that that's a huge sort of sore spot for a lot of parents and educators. Let's be real. But one of the conversations I was actually having with one of the teaching faculty that I'm working with at the moment is around the obsession of not just the attention grabby thing, but also about the need for validation. We seem to be raising a generation that is
Soft.
just, sorry, what was that?
Soft.
Soft. Okay, so that's one way of putting it. I feel like they're more often than not just craving to be heard and craving to be seen, because we live in a generation now that is raising people that, their entire identities are rooted in how many likes they're getting. Back in the day, it was who could win the brawl in the playground, or who could, whatever, get the best grades. But and to be fair, historically, parents have spent more time with their children at home, whereas now we're very busy. So how are you sort of navigating like that space when it comes to young people recognizing and validating themselves and recognizing their dopeness without having to necessarily rely on Instagram likes and TikTok followers?
Yeah, no, this is super solid again. This is a big part of a personal growth journey in general, right? Is getting more comfortable in your own skin. And part of that is training your mind not to compare. And part of that is your habits. So if you're, over flooding yourself with social media, you're being addicted to comparing, and that's a problem. So part of the reason why we're pulling back from some of that and doing more real life connecting is so you give yourself a freaking chance here. Otherwise, if you're flooding yourself with constant comparisons, it's going to be hard to train your mind. A lot of these kids say they can't meditate. Then I laugh. I'm like, that's the point of meditation, is to train your mind. I'm like, right. One of the things I say playfully all the time, because I get a new athlete on the phone, a lot of times they're a genetic specimen, right? And the one thing my twin brother and I didn't have is size. We were super athletic, but we had no size. So there's nowhere to go with it.
Right.
And some of these kids I coach have got all the size in the world, right? They're big, strong, fast. They're D1s, they're pros, right? And I get on the phone with them and I'm like, how much time a day do you train your body? And they're going to be, the answer is roughly 4 or 5 hours a day. And I'm like, I know the answer to this question. And I almost always ask it. And how much time a day do you train your mind? And we're lucky if we get 4 or 5 minutes again, right?
Yeah.
4 or 5 minutes if we're lucky. So I'm always working on helping them balance it out. I mean, this kid that threw the no-hitter, he did 11 minutes of Wim Hof and 18 minutes of meditation before his outing, right? And he's ADD, diagnosed all this crap as an adolescent, right? And some of it's real and some of it is crap, meaning like some diagnoses aren't accurate and some are very obviously very necessary. And a lot of kids are on stimulants, and that's a whole nother conversation. And it's a big conversation.
Yeah.
But the point is, though, all these kids that say they can't meditate, or adults that say it's not true, it just is hard work in the beginning. Anything you do in the beginning, like that has to do with being still and being. The other thing that I say playfully is, like, I have a driven side, I have a playful side, I have a silly side, right? I have a bohemian side, but I also have a Greek side. That's my metaphor for like just sipping freaking coffee and not wanting to do anything. We're not. Right? I pay my taxes, by the way. I know they don't pay their taxes there, but just being playful around Greece, I don't know.
I call that my Fijian side. I feel you.
Yeah, I like to be. right? I like to be, right? And so there's not enough of that being too.
Yeah.
With parents, I'm always getting the parents, some of the executives I coach, they've got teenage kids, and I'm teaching them to do no agenda time, nowhere to go, nothing to accomplish.
Ooh.
Yes, no agenda. So when they go, because they're always locked into an agenda with their kids, their grades or their sports, right? And so what I teach the parents to do is go spend time with your kids every week, an hour or two, whatever it is, and you have no agenda. That's a lot of homework for a parent. No agenda. Like you're not trying to accomplish anything. It's all about letting that go. It's all about literally nowhere to go, nothing to accomplish, nothing to achieve, which by the way, is intimacy.
Yeah.
And our
Yeah.
culture doesn't teach intimacy. See?
I love that because when I'm teaching, whether it's one-on-one coaching or whether it's in the classroom setting, I'm very big on student-driven learning. So, and often, every teacher's like, "Where's your lesson plans?" I'm like, my plan is for the kids to be human beings, not human doings, and to celebrate their beingness and channel that in a way that's
lovely.
creative. And I love and respect.
And
what
that's
you're saying
absolutely
so
lovely.
much.
And that's a great way of putting it, just to
Yeah.
appreciate your beingness. And there's just too much emphasis, like you said, on doing and on achieving. And, look, these kids that go to top schools, like, the Ivies and so on, and the second tier, most of the males, what do they want to do? They want to be hedge fund investment bankers, right? Like or consultants or something. It's all about the money, and it's fine. You'll get your big house and you'll get your pretty woman, but where are you going to be at 40? Most of them are pretty unhappy. I've coached thousands of people. It's a little bit, it's a little more complicated than that, really, right? You want to actually reflect a little bit deeper. So I'm getting these kids to reflect deeper, if and when they're ready.
Yeah. I love that. It's such powerful work. And the fact that you are teaching and coaching people from young, 13, 14, up until adulthood, you must have seen a huge plethora of just growth moments, but also kind of stagnant, trying to unlearn habits, right?
Yeah, well, the thing I say all the time, playfully, but there's a lot of truth in it, is the adults are a little more stimulating to coach because their lives are more complicated, but they're pretty dug in. Whereas
Exactly.
the kids aren't as stimulating, but man, is it fun because they're willing to, go live in Europe or Asia. I coach everybody to go live internationally if possible.
I mean, that's
Because
what I
once you're
did.
out of the United States, is that?
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Went to Vietnam, came to America.
There you go. My, Pongput Pasatay Dai Noi, right? I can speak a little Thai because my wife is Thai. I
Right.
lived in Bangkok once, right? So,
Yeah.
that international experience, when, as right? I know, which makes sense why you're so likable, right? It's because you're clued in here. But you're clued into there are different ways of living, and as a musician, that too. Artists have a little more creativity that way, a little more freedom.
Yeah.
But a lot of these kids that are going to go into finance, they're not exploring it all. And I understand if you're the 10 or 20% where that's your thing, because look, I have this theory that if you have 1 million lawyers in the United States, it used to be 700,000, there's probably 1 million now, right? 10% love it, 20% like it. The other 70% are freaking miserable. And that's 700,000 attorneys. And that goes for doctors, that goes for investment bankers, it goes for most professions. They're really not exploring enough when they're young. They're just going into what they perceive to be the most money, power, status, or whatever it is, or following safety and security, whatever. If your dad was an orthodontist, maybe say it.
Right.
As opposed to having the courage to, maybe not make as much money or bartend for a while. One of the kids I'm coaching right now, he's writing music and he's DJing and he's bartending. And he's coming out of a business school, a top business school. But I've been coaching him for 4 years, and that guy is happier than all his friends that are doing corporate jobs, making decent money, I guess, but they're drinking on the weekends and they're all miserable. And he's doing life his way. And by the way, his bartending, he makes $1,500 a week in 6 to 8 hour shifts.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why, I'm so big on the message of don't let the world write your song. We're so conditioned to fit into the box that society places us in that we forget to, for yourself, you have the Greek side, you have the Buddhist side, you have the, whatever. so many sides to us, and yet we're still so convinced that we
Right,
need to fit
but
into.
someone's developing those sides, right? You're developing those sides in the
Mm,
kids that you guide.
that's
I'm
true.
developing those other sides. Without someone actively developing them, it's very difficult because the program will take them to whatever it is that they're conditioned to.
Absolutely.
And that's why
Absolutely.
living outside the US, it throws that conditioning right in your face, how
Yeah.
limited your conditioning is. It really
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Because people are far happier elsewhere with
Hmm.
so much less.
Hmm. I spent half my life growing up in Fiji, and
Right.
totally different world. Totally different world. I want to. There's one other thing that I want to pick on before we sort of wrap things up, and
Pick
you know,
on's a
we've.
funny way of putting it.
Sorry.
Pick on is a funny expression.
Well, pick on because I'm
No,
so
no,
fascinated by this. Your work, especially for teenagers that are transitioning into these Ivy League schools, into their tertiary education and just adulthood in general, have so much pressure on them, especially post-pandemic. If I can say we're post-pandemic, I'm curious to know if there are any kind of tips, tricks, or mindfulness strategies that you can um, recommend that the parents specifically can use with their kids, maybe as a bonding, exercise, or just for the kids themselves to allow themselves permission to exist as opposed to constantly achieve.
Yeah, well, that one's going to be a tricky one depending on what kind of environment, how competitive the environment you're coming from
That's
is,
true.
right? And how open your mind is and who your parents are. So it's a tricky one. So that's complicated. It's an individual thing, in general. But
Sure.
specifically, that's the importance of, even girls. I'm always like, more careful because I playfully say you just got to stay away from serial killers. But being able to have dinner by yourself, all these kids, they don't have experiences by themselves in their own energy, in their own skin. So I'm always coaching everybody to be able to do things solo occasionally, like go have a
Hmm.
drink at a bar if they're, if they're old enough or whatever it is,
Hmm.
or,
Hmm.
order a
Cup of
burger.
tea. Yeah.
Yeah, a cup of
Yeah.
tea or a coffee. Yeah, go grab a coffee. One of the kids, some of the kids like in high school, if they're not into coffee, I have them do, 10 different slices of pizza in 10 different pizza restaurants in their whole area.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because
Okay.
then they can do a date and they're a pro. Like, you know what I mean? They've been to 10 different pizza places. They know where to take the girl for the best pizza, right? So,
I love that. I love that.
so mixing it up is a big,
Inquire.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so mixing it up is huge.
Yeah. And I love that. Inquirer Rachel says, "Go to the movies alone." I am a huge person
Yes.
about that. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go to
Yeah.
the movies alone. I've learned to love these things, and what these kids do, they've never done it. It's like,
Yeah.
when some of the kids come and visit, they've never been on a plane alone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's unbelievable. So they just having experiences solo can really help you build that healthy self-esteem and get comfortable in your own energy.
Yeah. No, I love that so much. Yeah, but I go on me dates all the time, much to the bemusement of my fiance. He doesn't quite understand it, but I'm like, listen, I'm gonna take me out because whatever, you're busy or you're boring me today. But you're right. It starts and ends with yourself. If you don't love yourself, you cannot give love. You need to make sure that your own cup is full all the time. And I'm so excited that you're doing that kind of coaching through sports, through mental awareness and mental health awareness and breathing and mindfulness. I love your work so much. For those that are watching, how can people get in touch with you?
We have the Beacons AI, Dr. Brett's Journey. So all my social media is there, Dr. Brett's Journey. And then drbrettdenkin.com is my main website. drbrettsjourney.com is also another website that we have. We also ran a podcast for a year. We have a lot of video, a lot of content. I have a ebook that I wrote, Conversations with Dr. Brett, about a young woman that I met at a coffee shop, and I started teaching her and mentoring her around healthier relationships. So it's all about communication skills training through also training your mind as well.
I love
So
that.
there's just a lot of different ways to reach me.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Brett, for your time. Of course, if you are listening to the replay, please check him out. Dr. Brett DENKIN on Facebook, Dr. Brett's Journey on Instagram, Dr. Brett DENKIN on Twitter, company Dr. Brett on LinkedIn, and of course the actual website, drbrettdenkin.com. That's doctor as in DR, not as in DOC. TOR. But thank you guys so much for tuning in for yet another episode of the Reconnect with Your Teenager podcast. My name is Emma G, and I am here to tell you that you are amazing. You are powerful beyond measure. You have all of the answers in you. You just got to be brave enough to write your song. Don't let the world write it for you. Until next time, guys, be good, be kind, and I'll see you next time. Write your song. Until next time, guys, be good, be kind, until next time, guys. Next time.
Breaking in my headspace, I'm trying to get my feelings straight. I've overthought my mistakes, I turn water to wine, so hard to stay sober. I'm damaged and I'm love stoned, so hard to remain in control. Rewriting what I thought I'd know, and I'm drinking it in, but the lesson ain't over. And I can almost pinpoint where we went wrong. I'm not about the sad songs, the foundation said I'm good to go. No matter what comes my way, I'll be smiling every step I take. I'm a legend, make no mistake, that I'm living proof that love wins. No matter what the future holds, I'm here and I'm not letting go. I'm a legend, baby, you should know that I'm living proof that love wins. Living proof that love wins. It's strange who I used to be, but I'm not going down quietly. I know I create my destiny. When it's bright as light, the evergreen knows it. I left behind the what if, I broke up with the negative. I'm flirting with abundance, and I'm drinking it in. My purpose is magic. I can almost pinpoint where my love began. I'm so glad that I know who I am, 'cause I'm a woman, I'm not a man. Whoa. No matter what comes my way, I'll be laughing every step I take. I'm a legend, make no mistake, I'm living proof that love wins. No matter what the future holds, I'll be here and I'm not letting go. I'm a legend, baby, you should know, I'm living proof that love wins. I'm living proof that love wins. Hey! Hey! I'm living proof that love wins. I'm living proof that love wins. No matter what comes my way, I'll be dancing every step I take. I'm a legend, make no mistake, I'm living proof that love wins. No matter what the future holds, I'll be here and I'm not letting go. I'm a legend, baby, you should know that I'm living proof that love wins. I'm living proof that love wins. I'm living proof that love wins.